This is Monocle on Design, a show where we discuss everything from architecture and craft to furniture and graphic design. I'm Nick Manise. On today's program, we visit a floating architectural office in Rotterdam, meet industrial designer Tej Chauhan, plus a preview of some of the design stories in the latest issue of Konfekt magazine. All that coming up on Monocle on Design. First up on today's show, we head to the Netherlands and to Rotterdam's Rijnhaven port, to be precise. There, moored since 2021, is Floating Office Rotterdam, also known as FOR. This buoyant building is the largest dedicated floating office structure in the world. Sitting 3 stories high and built from cross-laminated timber, it was designed by the international architecture firm Powerhouse Company. Among the tenants that call it home are the Global Centre on Adaptation. Plus, there's a host of public facilities, including a restaurant and a floating swimming pool in the Maas River. To find out more about the project, Monocle's Maylee Evans met Albert Takashi Richters, partner at Powerhouse Company.
The floating office is an office building that is floating in one of the former harbors of Rotterdam. Rotterdam has multiple generations of harbors. They grew as boats became larger, and this is one of the harbors that has a certain scale and size to it that is larger than the old historic inner city harbors, and therefore there's a new context that is now enveloped by the city. It's much bigger in scale and also brings with it challenges of how do you make this into an environment for the city, for its inhabitants. So this Rijnhaven is one of the harbors where they're working on a huge project to reclaim part of the harbor in order to make grounds for new developments, as well as a large park with a sort of beach in the city. So you could say that this new Rijnhaven becomes a huge square now of water, within which there's different projects, innovations that take place, one of which is the floating office.
You've mentioned that it is the largest floating office. What are some of the challenges of creating a space on water like this? Water levels is just the first thing that springs to mind, but I'm sure there's many others.
Well, I think the most important challenge is, apart from the obvious one, which is staying afloat, is that it's a balancing act. Other than when you're on land, where you basically drill piles into the ground until you meet a sort of stable footing. You don't have that on water. And that means that you have to design a building that is symmetrical somehow, or that distributes weight as evenly as possible, because otherwise you'll be slanted, or you'll have to compensate that with extra ballast. Extra ballast means extra weight. Then you get a whole domino effect of extra weight means you need to have more volume to be able to float, more volume, more material. It becomes less sustainable, less efficient, and so on. So in the end, the fact that you create a design that is symmetrical and balanced, literally balanced, is always an important starting point. That doesn't mean that you get rid of the challenge completely, because within the building you will always have parts that make the building heavier on one side than the other side. So you'll always have to somehow mitigate that with some ballast. But what we try to do within the building is to really place really heavy objects, like a big stairs or like the sanitary blocks where you have the toilets and the elevator even, to kind of place them in positions where that will balance each other out. And this is something that happens throughout the building, not only on the inside, but also on the outside. So we have a green roof on the north side, and then we have on the south side, on the south roof, it's a fully solar paneled roof, but the solar panels are much lighter. So basically the building wants to tilt towards the green roof, but that then is compensated below, where we have our deck that is hanging off the floating pontoons, that is working as a sort of counterweight to compensate for the extra weight on the green roof side. It's a kind of a technical thing, but I hope you can visualize more or less how that works. Those tricks in trying to balance everything is something that happens throughout the whole design, basically, and is also very much part of the design process.
There are sustainable, like green elements in the design, but the way that they're handled here is very quiet. It's very subtle in the approach. I wondered if you could speak a bit more about importing those ideas, but making it not feel so loud and brash with saying, look at us, we're doing really green ways of building.
Yeah. I mean, I think that has to do with the fact that actually the building was commissioned for a very important organization called the Global Center on Adaptation, an organization that brings together stakeholders and global leaders to find solutions regarding climate change, but also the fact that we've passed certain boundaries in climate change, so we need to adapt. Hence, the Global Center on Adaptation. They're our upstairs neighbor. We're invited to bring their headquarters to Rotterdam, and Rotterdam proposed to them, like, if you choose Rotterdam as your headquarter city, or we will work on a floating office because that's a great symbol for sustainability. That's why the building should also be kind of representative. It should be elegant. It should be inviting, and for us, and that's just a matter of taste, I would say, but our signature in our design work is to make the design feel almost as a matter of fact, and we don't necessarily need to scream elements of sustainability or use them to show that it's a sustainable project. We just need to achieve it by doing so intrinsically. We really thought about a very neutral kind of architectural grid made out of wood, where we also celebrate the wooden structure. You see it on the outside, you see it on the inside. And then this neutral grid is basically the house for all the different users within, whether it's a restaurant or whether it's an architecture office or the Global Center on Adaptation. So that's a very long answer to why the design kind of follows this language rather than being something that has to really demonstrate its sustainability. And at the end of the day, it's a carbon neutral building. So all the timber basically holds the carbon that has been absorbed by the trees during their lifetime, and that's embedded in this wood. And that means that it compensates for the fact that our floating foundation, which is made out of concrete, has a sort of CO2 positive use. So the wood compensates for that, to the extent that it becomes even a carbon negative project. And then the solar panels on the roof I was talking about, we have almost 900 square meters of solar panels. They power all the systems within. So that makes it also an energy positive building. And if you kind of put all these systems together in a very pragmatic and balanced way, fine-tune them to their fullest potential, then you get the most sustainable office building basically in the Netherlands.
You've been sort of settled in this building for a couple of years now. Sort of what details have you rediscovered maybe, or things have you noticed that maybe you hadn't anticipated in that drafting process?
Well, nowadays with computer-aided design, of course, there's a lot you can anticipate. I think some things we maybe didn't anticipate is that in the end, even though all the wood here is really machine-made, it's still a live thing, so it does move. Sometimes you hear the wood expanding or contracting depending on the seasons and the temperatures. The building is completely stable. There's nothing happening there. But for instance, like certain gaps between connections of wooden beams that get bigger in the winter and then get smaller during summer. There's also some softer aspects to the experience being in the building that we didn't design but that are very positive. Let's say, this constant connection with the environment. I think, of course, you design it with that idea, but you really experience it once you're working here for a few years, and it's a very nice one. Even on a cloudy or a stormy day, it's fantastic to be here. Outside, it's can be windy and the water can be a bit choppy, but still it's a kind of serene inside. So that's a very nice experience. As well as, some qualities, acoustic qualities. Wood really helps mute certain sounds because everything is made out of wood. The floors are made out of wood, walls, columns, so that really helps that. And another positive thing about this use of timber is basically it regulates to a certain extent the humidity levels automatically. So this contracting and expanding of this wood, it's not something you can calculate precisely, but it is also definitely something you can appreciate when you're experiencing working here.
That was Albert Takashi Richters in conversation with this show's producer, Maylee Evans. We'll be right back after this.
The Menu, bringing you Monocle's recipe for the best in drinking and dining. We make entertaining a doddle.
It's incredibly easy to make.
With expert opinions.
You can use fish fillets, which you grill in the oven or pan fry.
A bit of seasoning.
Lots of lime, a lot of cracked pepper, and a bit of good olive oil.
And plenty of spice.
And then you cook it in caraway and 7 spice.
As well as something sweet.
Then you take a big pot of mascarpone and spoon it into your egg yolk.
And maybe even a little bit nuts.
You take it out, you top it with some pine nuts, and you're good to go.
It's a recipe that's guaranteed to impress.
It's slightly controversial, but it's the one thing that has surprised the most people when they eat it.
Premiering live every Friday at 2000 London time, midday in Los Angeles, or downloadable wherever you get your podcasts.
Over his decades-long career as an industrial designer, Tej Chauhan has worked for major brands such as IKEA, Nike and Nokia, creating everything from kitchen tools and eyewear to televisions and door handles. Tej is known for his singular design language, which is often described as playful and experimental. He has won numerous awards, including the Red Dot and the Cannes Lion, and is currently living and working in the Finnish capital. It's there, at his Helsinki office, that he met Monocle's correspondent, Petri Burtsoff. Tej began by recalling his creative endeavours as a child, explaining that the same curiosity still drives him today.
Far back as 5-6 years old, I was just like, I could see these weird inventions that I was drawing and putting down. And I think that from there, that never left. And so it was a fairly kind of linear trajectory between those kind of childish drawings to, getting through school, loving the art classes and the woodwork classes and the metal workshops, and then, going to St. Martin's. And I guess I still love that childlike feeling I get when I'm asked to create something, when I'm drawing. Those sort of moments that follow a briefing, or even during a briefing, the sort of gut kicks in and I immediately start to have ideas and feelings about, what this could be or what that could be. And I find that very exciting still.
The key to Chauhan's design thinking is emotion. Many of his designs, such as the ones for the Finnish mobile phone maker Nokia, whose design team he was a part of, his watches for the Swiss brand Rado, or the tablet that he designed for the grocery retailer Tesco, all feature a distinctive, very singular design that could also be described as bold.
You can elicit positive feelings from any surface of any object around us. So it doesn't matter what I'm working on. My objective is always the same. How do you make people feel great when using this product? I still believe in a way that there is an element of the designer that is still king in a way. But, my perspective on that, my job and what we do as an office is try to figure out how we make a difference to the brands that we work with. How do we get them to differentiate, distinguish themselves, stand out, not to be polarizing and not for not for the sake of being different, but being, really having something really tangible, a tangible difference that makes the user feel delight, visual delight, and then tactile delight, and then functional delight.
Given his quest for boldness and differentiation during his long career, I asked Chauhan if he thinks that the design industry has become less bold than it used to be.
I've built a career upon differentiation. What I love doing and what excites me because I know the end results also excite the clients we partner with, is figuring out how to get brands and objects and products, how to get them to stand out. How do you create differentiation when we are surrounded by such saturation? When you're working with big tech companies, where decisions are taken quite slowly because there's huge investments involved, it's quite, often difficult for them to see, the wood for the trees sometimes. And very, very often what we propose is, we find that companies are often looking sideways and not forwards, because they're worried about making mistakes. They're worried about losing on investment. And it's those few companies that we work with that are able to not just look sideways and be brave enough, to look forwards.
Next, I asked Chauhan what's on his desk now and if there were some upcoming projects that he could share with us.
So we've just launched a new watch for Swiss watchmaker Rado. It's called the Diastar Original Tej Chauhan. It's a special edition. And we've just come back from the India Art Fair in Delhi, where the initial launch was. And it's just such fun, to work with Rado as a brand. So we're doing, we've got a nice relationship with those guys. We've got a couple of interesting things to add to the Rado story coming up. So we're doing Swiss watches, we're doing headphones. We are building on our portfolio of nursery products for Motorola Nursery, so technology in the nursery space, which is really exciting and also very fun, really a lot of fun to work on. We're doing sunglasses for a running brand. We're doing an office chair. We're doing a wooden chair. A lot of we've got quite a few things knocking around on the drawing board at the moment. I need different things to focus on. I need I'm kind of doing 2 or 3 things at the same time all the time.
From Monocle in Helsinki, I'm Petri Burtsov.
What kind of city do you want to live in? Every week on The Urbanist, we delve into the biggest questions about urban living and meet the people championing change in our cities. From starchitects to designosauruses, protected views to landfills, river walks and sidewalks, wayfinding and cycle highways. The city is alive and kicking, so how can we make them better places to live in?
The other great city creation, of course, is sex. Young people go to cities to have a good time and to enjoy themselves and to meet their life partners and maybe a few other people on the way.
Join me, Andrew Tuck, every Thursday at 2000 hours London time for a brand new episode. Or subscribe to the podcast and listen as you go. The Urbanist, the show that knows its good mares from its planning nightmares. Finally, on today's episode, let's join Monocle's Associate Editor Grace Charlton and Konfekt Editor Sophie Grove as they discuss the newest issue of Konfekt. It's a sister publication of Monocle, and its Spring 2025 issue marks the launch of its first dedicated design issue. Over to you, Grace and Sophie.
It's actually out on the spring equinox, which feels really wonderful. But I think it's interiors and craft and design because there's this wonderful kind of flurry of events happening with Salone in April and then the Venice Biennale in May. And we just feel like spring is a moment to kind of really sort of step out of that kind of cosy kind of sort of all toasty room and sort of really look around and start assessing and thinking about the world. So that's why we've done it. And it just coincides with all these wonderful events that you've been so busy writing about.
I also feel like spring is a moment where I want to refresh my entire life, including my interiors. So I was flicking through this beautiful issue and it's really inspiring. I think every aspect that Konfekt covers, whether it's travel or, conversations or residences, they all have this design fil rouge, if you will. I know that you also got deeply involved with acoustics for this issue and the design of sound. Can you tell?
It's one of my sort of preoccupations is kind of the sonic and acoustic quality of spaces, which I feel we've sort of lost in a sense in the kind of, and I don't want to blame modernism because, it isn't necessarily because we've taken all the rugs out, but there is, there are lots of echoey spaces and I feel the world has got very loud. But what I did is invite some participants from the Venice Biennale to come to Munich to this beautiful house, which was actually built by the inventor of the diesel engine. And it's owned by an acoustic designer and architect called Marie Einer. And she makes these wonderful installations that absorb sound. They're very artistic and wacky and kind of wonderful, colourful things. And she works a lot with Laura Piana and Hermes as well, doing pieces. So we all gathered together and had this lovely lunch, but we just discussed sound. It wasn't really as literal as aren't restaurants noisy, which I obviously did make the point, but it was more about kind of soundscapes. And one of the participants was a poet, there was an artist there, and an architect, Alice Lemeau, made the point about how in modernity we're creating these layers of sound that even we can't hear, but they're kind of atmospheric. Animals, can hear these big data centres in Luxembourg where she is representing the pavilion for. We're kind of unwittingly altering the kind of way that we sort of occupy sound. And I think there's so many dimensions to the way that we're listening, to the way that we're interacting, and that have these impacts on the spatial practices. So we were talking all about that.
I love it. And there's a quote in there that I wrote down because I agree with it so much. It's bad acoustics are like pollution. It's true. I think you don't realize how much sound affects you. And that was a really enlightening article.
And so much of what we're seeing at the Biennale, in Venice, in Milan, it's very visual often. I mean, we talk about the senses. And so this panel is really about architecture and how we need to prioritise the 5 senses and not just the visual sense.
And there's another article that you wrote in this Konfekt issue, which is a residence in Palma that is so beautiful. It's owned by Marta Solis, who is a translator with a very extensive book collection. How was that? How was it to report, getting really nosy, going in someone's home?
I loved it so much. So she lives in this sort of 50s era block just overlooking the kind of Corniche in Palma that used to be a hotel, and it used to have like flamingos in the garden and peacocks, and there was beautiful jacaranda trees all around it. There's a huge pool, but now it's private apartments. It's called the Phoenix. So I was there. I mean, honestly, Grace, I went through her cupboards one by one. We looked at everything she owns, all her crockery. She has she's a real Anglophile, even though she's, Spanish. I think she was raised in Madrid, but also Palma, and she just understood just the value of all these beautiful juxtapositions of things, like the old, just lovely things she's collected at flea markets next to these amazing Saarinen chairs, just really beautiful, cosy, sunny little nook that I can just feel myself retiring to one day. But she's translating Treasure Island at the moment from English, and it's been translated before, but she's doing her own version, and she just kind of sits in this wonderful Eames chair all day, looking out and thinking about pirates and boats.
What a dream. I love that for her. Can't wait to read it. I think it's interesting because we talk about it a lot on design, but your homes and everything, that they're so integral to your personality and what you convey in the world. And I think going into someone's home and seeing their life that's been lived and the different flea markets they went to and their taste in design is just always so inspirational.
It feels like such a privilege sometimes to be rifling through people's sort of private realms, and actually they're telling their story. She has 3,000 books in this apartment, which is only 150 square metres. And then it just the layering of meaning and history and all the paintings, everything she owned had a purpose, which made me feel, I really reflected on the idea of even buying something, using it, loving it. Actually, she's almost a minimalist, even though she has so much stuff. She uses all of it and loves all of it. So it's had such a sense of purpose, everything she had.
I love that. And there was another photographic marvel in there that really caught my eye. It's a fashion photo shoot that takes place at the Villa Noailles in Hyères, which is in the south of France. It's this amazing modernist villa by Robert Malley Stevens. I went there once and it was like one of the most magical day out. So yeah, how is it for you to sort of bring fashion to life in the middle of this really, modernist marvel?
I mean, it's wonderful. I love the story behind the villa. It was conceived by these amazing patrons in the late 20s. And it just has that sense of the Riviera and like the modernism, early days of modernism. I think Man Ray, he filmed there. And there was just so many of the kind of really big artists of the modernist period used to kind of just cavort there. So I think it has a lot of kind of wonderful ghosts and you can feel the atmosphere. And it also has this sculptural gardens, really cubist kind of gardens with these sempervenens everywhere. And then when you put the looks that were quite classics, Daphne Hazard, the stylist, she really went for some beautiful, there's almost nautical jumpers, but then also some slightly more sculptural, kind of very white, very fresh shirting and layers. And you just feel like, you really feel that synergy between the architecture and the fashion, which is so nice to see because actually, I think sometimes interiors are beautiful, but they're just, when you see the human form in them, then they just speak in different ways, and especially if there's really sort of these really graphic shapes coming in fashion at the moment. So it was really fun, and I just enjoyed thinking about Robert Mallet Stevens, and I really love his work. I've always go to Saint-Jean-de-Luz, and there's a really amazing sort of casino pavilion he built there, which is probably far too big for a medieval town. But I love the way that they just chucked all the rules out, and then these kind of like vestiges of that period are still around. So we based it there, although the sun didn't shine, but I think that was in a way added something.
Atmospheric, for sure. And what I love about the Villa Noailles is its director, Jean-Pierre Blanc, is really involved in keeping, craft and design alive. That's where he stages the Design Parade, which is an annual design festival, as well as all these like fashion prizes and whatnot. So it's a beautiful, beautiful location, and I'm so glad that it's in Konfekt.
Great. I'm happy that you liked it. And I think it just has that, it's a living space. As you say, they have an accessories prize, which is really unusual. I think it's bringing the idea that design, these accessories we love so much, they are pieces of design. They're functional. They're, they're designed for us to use and interact with and cherish. So I think it's really nice to bring, the design language from the front sections to this back section and really celebrate them.
Thank you so much, Sophie. It was so nice to talk to you in the studio about the new issue of Konfekt. Hopefully it becomes a quarterly tradition.
Yeah, I hope so.
It
feels wonderful to be quizzed by a design real expert and look at it through a certain lens. And I hope people discover it and devour it alongside all the amazing publications you're doing this spring.
My thanks to Konfekt magazine editor Sophie Grove and Monocle's associate editor Grace Charlton. As they mentioned, Konfekt's Spring 2025 Design Special is available on all good newsstands now. And that's all for today's show. For more design stories, listen to our 5-minute midweek bonus show, Monocle on Design Extra, which airs on Thursdays. And if you enjoy print, then do pick up a copy of Monocle magazine as well. It's on all good newsstands now. And if you enjoy print, then do pick up a copy of Monocle magazine too. Today's episode was produced and edited by Maylee Evans. I'm Nick Manise, and you can reach me on nm@monocle.com. Thanks for listening.